Hello everybody and welcome back to Soulkken, where I teach SoulCalibur players how to transition into Tekken and vice versa. This video will be geared more towards SoulCalibur players trying to learn Tekken, since Tekken 7 will be coming out on June 2nd, which is in about 2.5 months from now. So let's begin the guide. In this episode I'm going to be talking about movement. In SoulCalibur you can go in 8 directions. So any direction that you can press on your D-pad, you can walk in that direction. However, it is important to note that you cannot step in that direction, and let me tell you what the distinction is. So, walking means you're holding the input and you're actively walking. A step means you tap the direction and you just perform that little motion right there. Now, when you step, you can only go sideways, forwards, and backwards. So that's 4 directions versus the 8 directions you can go when you're walking. So here's a forward step, here's a back step, here's a side step right, and here's a side step left. Versus back walking, forward walking. That's almost like running, right? And then side walking. Now in SoulCalibur specifically, there is also a mechanic called quick step, where you double tap the direction sideways. You can only do this in 2 directions. Alright, and you'll see that white outline, and what you can do after a quick step is your 8-way run attack, and you can also do your 8-way run attacks in general just by being in a state of movement. So when you're walking or you're quick stepping, you can do 8-way run attacks. But when you sidestep or backstep, you can just do your attacks from like a normal standing state like Shiba's in right now. So let me show you what 8-way run attacks are and how they look different. So, for example, this is Shiba's 2B. And if I were to keep walking in the 2 direction and press B, I get 2-2B. 2-2B. Which is way different from this move. So that's an example of an 8-way run attack, and as the name would imply, you can do that from all 8 directions, and you can do it with any horizontal, vertical, or kick button. Like there's always an 8-way run attack involving an A, B, or K. So here's 2-2A, here's 2-2B, and here's 2-2K. All of them are different from 2A, 2B, and 2K. Another thing about 8-way run attacks is that usually, but not always, your advancing diagonals will match your forward moves. So let me show you an example. So this is his 3-3B, and this is his 6-6B, and it's the exact same animation. That doesn't always apply to every button, and I'll give you an example right now. Here's Shiba's 3-3A, and here's Shiba's 6-6A, which are not the same move at all. So you definitely want to learn what the character's capable of that you're playing from each 8-way run position. This also will mirror backwards, so if you do a retreating diagonal attack, sometimes it will share the same animation as just holding back and doing your 8-way run attack. So here's also another example. Here's Shiba's back A, and here's Shiba's 11A. It's the same animation, but that's way different than saying if I did the vertical button instead, and this is his 4-4B versus his 11B. So that's how 8-way run attacks work. As long as you're already moving or you perform a quick step, you can perform an 8-way run move. So, yeah. 6-6B, 3-3B, 2-2B, 11B, 4-4B, and then it'll share the same... It always... Another thing about 8-way run attacks is that you'll always share the same move if you're going sideways. So like 2-2 and 8 excuse me, 2-2 and 8-8 always share the same attack. Same thing with 11 and 77, and 9-9 and 3-3. they're always shared. However, in some rare scenarios, you'll have the same attack, but the way they orient themselves is based on the direction they're going, so sometimes it can change the positioning of the characters on the screen, but the properties of the move are the same in every other aspect, frame-wise. So that's 8-way run attacks, the best I can explain it. In this game, there's also auto sidestep attacks. So some moves have a built-in sidestep or a built-in backstep, so that's good to know. But also, auto sidestep attacks are not all made equally. Let's just leave it at that. So the usefulness of the evasion is sometimes lost. So like this move, you know, it backsteps, but generally in a match, it's better to just do a regular backstep just because of how far you're moving and like how like slow the move is. You know, you have to keep in mind that it's still an attack, and if it's reactable or it has bad frames, you may want to end up avoiding it. Another thing about movement in 3D fighters is that every character has a side that they tend to track harder in. So for example, against Maxi, you always want to sidestep right in order to make certain moves whiff, because if you go left against Maxi, you will get tracked by more moves than usual. So that's just game knowledge, and it varies from character to character, whether or not you want to go right more often than you go left, or vice versa. I'll leave my guide, Google document, in the description on which way you should be stepping against each character in this game, in my opinion, and from my experience. So that may be useful to you. And one last thing for the Tekken players, there is backdash canceling in this game, but it's ultimately not better than backwalking, it just looks cooler. So you'd just be doing it to show off. It wouldn't really help you move faster. And that's the only note I want to make of that. And that should conclude the SoulCalibur portion of this video. So something that I forgot to put in my initial run that may have been implied to some of you, but to some of you it may not have, is in regards to 8-way run attacks. You know how I said you can do sidestep B, and you get that move. You can also, like, if you're already like moving backwards, you can roll very quickly to the desired 8-way run attack and do it instantly without like moving sideways, assuming you're already in a moving state. So, for example, I'm holding back, but then if I press forward real quick, or like 3 real quick, I get 6-6B. Or 3-3B. So that's just something that I feel like I probably should have mentioned, is that you can do your sidestep moves while you're already moving forward and backwards, and you can do your backwards moves while you're already sidestepping. So that's just something I wanted to mention real quick, and that doesn't really exist in Tekken. You have to commit to the sidestep and then do your sidestep attack. Okay, and hello everybody, welcome to the Tekken portion of this guide. And I will be starting off differentiating the fact that in SoulCalibur you have 8 directions you can go in, and in this game it's only 4. It is still a 3D fighter, but you can only go sideways, backwards, or forwards. You cannot go diagonally. The only way you could simulate diagonal directions, and you usually end up doing this in SoulCalibur anyways, is you sidestep and then you backstep, and that usually simulates the same thing. It's just it seems like it just takes longer, right, than just doing a sidestep or a backstep, since you have to do 2 motions. So that's something to differentiate, is that there's only 4 directions. And in this game there is there are side steps as well as side walks. And same thing with forward steps or forward walks, and back steps and back walks. So that's the same. However, I will note that it's fundamentally harder to sidewalk things in this game and sidestep things because moves, you always have to like time your sidestep when you play this game. So you'll notice in these like YouTube videos where it's like, oh, all you have to do against this character is sidestep left or right. They'll do something like that, and they'll show you, oh, this is completely linear, right? And while that is true, you have to keep in mind that if they end up delaying or moving into it, it will realign, and you'll have to end up blocking it. So you always have to time your movements with the attack in the game whenever you're playing this, and that's not really the case when you play SoulCalibur. You can usually just end up walking the entire time regardless of any like delayed motions or movements. So that's something you really have to keep in mind, and that's why you may end up feeling like, oh well, he's sidestepping all my stuff when I'm attacking him, but when he's attacking me, I always seem to get hit, and that's mainly due to you not understanding the fact that there has to be a timing to it. And with that being said, it's a lot harder to sidestep things in a neutral game than it is when you're like brawling up close. So I really want to stress that fact because it's very apparent in this game. Another thing that's really apparent to learn is backdash canceling. So you'll notice that people simulate what's sort of like a better version of backwalking, because in backwalking in Tekken, it's pretty butt, right? You just move like that. Whereas you see these people in high level play, they do like this glitchy looking movement, or sometimes glitchy looking movement. It kind of depends on the character. It looks more clean against some other like animations. But basically what I mean to say is that there's backdash canceling in this game, and that's how you get like the true backwalk of Tekken. And for SoulCalibur players, I'll try to just say it verbally since it's easier that way than just showing the inputs, since my execution isn't known to be the best. So the way you would input a backdash cancel is 4, 414, 414, 414, and just keep repeating. So, and that's how you would simulate a backdash cancel. That's the ideal input, and the reason why that's the ideal input is you crouch for the minimal amount of frames, on top of the fact that you won't end up getting the quarter circle back. And that's important because with some characters like Brian and Paul, if you do a quarter circle back, you do something that's similar to what Alpha Patroclus does when he does a quarter circle back, and he ends up in a special stance that leaves him vulnerable. So you really want to get that 4-4-1-4 input down ideally, but if you don't play a character with a back sway, you can get away with it, but you'll end up being more vulnerable anyways because you'll be crouching for an extra frame by inputting 2 and 1 instead of just 1. So that's backdash canceling explained by Party Wolf. In this game there's also sidestep attacks. However, it's different from SoulCalibur because A, it's only like 1 or 2 moves, and B is because if you're already sidewalking, you can't input it, or if you're like, yeah, so yeah, if you're sidewalking, you can't input your sidestep attacks. So this is Kazuya's sidestep 1+2, but if I walk, I end up just getting 1+2. So that's the difference between like the sidestep attacks. You have to commit to the sidestep and attack. There's also special inputs for inputting forward and back in this game. So for example, this is Kazuya's forward 3, and this is Kazuya's forward 3. And there's also, you also gain certain attacks when you're in a running state. So I'm not going to press anything besides moving forward. So when I'm at this full screen position, if I just keep holding forward, I do an unblockable tackle. But if I am not as far away, I end up doing a tackle, and that's kind of like a mid throw. It is breakable, so keep that in mind. They're not that good. And there's also, if you're at that full screen range, you can do a slide kick. And if you're also at that full screen range, you can do something called a cross chop. They're not that good when you consider the fact that you could just do a running 3. And another thing about running 3 specifically is that if you input forward, 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 whatever running equivalent you have, cleanly up close, you just do it instantly. So keep that in mind. And in this game, there's also tracking slides, like I said in my SoulCalibur video. So if you want to get a list of tracking sites, and a really good one on the internet is one made by Nobi. So look up Nobi's sidestep guide. And that should be everything I have to say about the Tekken portion when it comes to movement. Okay, so one extra final piece that I forgot to include in my original takes is that if you're sidestepping, you know, it's really easy if you don't press a button, because what ends up happening when you press a button is sometimes you end up extending your hurt box into the axis that the vertical's on. So you end up getting hit by more things if you're sidestepping into an attack. So be very careful if you want to make something whiff, because if you're already attacking preemptively, you tend to get hit more often than when you press nothing at all. So please keep that in mind when you're evading things.